We're starting a new chapter now in our Learning AutoCAD course, and what we're going to do is look at creating simple geometry in AutoCAD. The first thing we're going to look at is object snaps, OSNAP, and object snap tracking, OTrack. And we've got a drawing for you. It's called geometry.dwg. You can download it from the library to use it to follow along with the video. Now, what we're going to do is utilize OSNAP and OTrack to create some lines on our drawing. So you can see that we've got a nice rectangle sitting there in the drawing. If I hover over it, the little tooltip will tell me it's a polyline and it's on the layer objects. So let's have a look now and see how we can add some lines to the drawing utilizing our object snaps and our object snap tracking. Now, they're down here on the status bar. There's object snap tracking, which you just switch on and off. And there's our object snaps there. If I click on the flyout, you can see that I've got these 5 go-to object snaps as my running object snaps. I've got endpoint, midpoint, center, intersection, and extension. Any of the object snaps that I click on will get a little tick next to them, and they will also become a running object snap. I can go into object snap settings and bring up the dialog box if I need to, set even more settings if I need to, and then OK it. So object snap tracking is on and object snap is on. I can utilize both of those. Please also ensure that your polar tracking is on, and you want to make sure that it's set to a default of 90 degrees, which is the default setting for polar tracking. Now we're going to go to the Home tab on the ribbon, into the Draw panel, and click on the Line command. And I'm going to come into the drawing area, and the dynamic input is prompting me to specify the first point of my line. I'm going to utilize object snaps and object snap tracking to draw my line from the center of the rectangle to the right-hand side. So I'm going to hover over this midpoint snap here. Notice it appears. I'm not going to click on it. That's the object snap tracking point there. I'm then going to hover over this point, another midpoint, and I'm not going to click. That's another object snap tracking point. Now, as I drag vertically downwards, you'll see the polar tracking line kick in. But as I approach that other object snap tracking point, can you see it shows me the intersection between those two midpoint object snap tracking points? When it appears, I left click. And now my line starts from the dead center of the rectangle. I'm now going to drag my line horizontally along the polar tracking line, and you'll find that I get an intersection or possibly a midpoint snap here. Doesn't matter, either will work as long as you're on the 0 degrees polar tracking. Left click, enter to finish, and you've drawn a line using purely object snaps and object snap tracking. Now, obviously object snap tracking allows you to work with points that you track from and to. You can just use your object snaps on a regular basis if you want to as well. So I can go back to the line command here, or what I could do is hit the space bar or the enter key, and that will repeat the last command that you used, which is the line command. So I've just pressed the space bar and the line command has kicked in. Now I can just use object snaps now to draw the lines that I want. So I can go endpoint here. There's an endpoint snap, left click. Coming down to this endpoint here, left click. Coming down to this endpoint here, left click. Now it may be that I didn't want that last line segment, so I can right click, and on the shortcut menu now, which is contextual, you'll notice I can undo the last line segment. So if I undo that, can you see it takes me back to the last point? Very useful if you've drawn a line segment that you don't need. So I'm going to go back to the endpoint again, repeat what I've just done, and press enter to finish, and there's my lines all drawn up, quick and easy, using object snaps. So that's how you can utilize object snap tracking, object snaps, and a little bit of polar tracking to work with your AutoCAD drawings and generate the geometry you need. Just before we start this next video, just make sure that you go back to the library and download another version of the geometry.dwg file so that you've got a blank rectangle like you can see on the screen at the moment. That'll make your life a lot easier as you work through this particular video. Once again, we're staying in the geometry.dwg file, and we're going to look at some other drafting settings now, which are polar and also ortho. Now, polar allows you to draw lines to specific angle increments. Ortho ties you to orthogonal angles, which are basically in the X and Y direction. So up and down and left and right. Let's have a look at polar tracking first and see how that works. Now, bear in mind, we've already got our object snaps and our object snap tracking on. They're here from the previous video, like so. Polar is here. I'm going to click on the flyout for it, and I'm going to change the angle to 45 degrees, like so. Now, if I click on that flyout again and go to tracking settings, you'll notice that I can add any additional angles I want to as well, and I can change the increments there too if I wish. I'll OK that now, and my angles are now set at 45-degree increments. So let's have a look at how that works when we draw a line. So as usual, Home tab on the ribbon and Draw panel. Like the previous video, click on the line command, and we're going to come into the drawing area and hover here. There's an endpoint snap there, and I'm going to left click. Now you'll notice as I drag the mouse, can you see the green dashed line appear? That's my polar tracking line. And if you look, the polar value for that is 315 degrees. If you look just above that, the dynamic input is telling me it's a 45-degree angle from the horizontal. Now, the benefit I have is I can utilize my object snap tracking here as well. If I come and hover over this midpoint here, and then just drag it out horizontally like so, as soon as I hit that 45 degrees, can you see I get an intersection? So I've got an exact 45-degree line coming from that corner, coming down and lining in with the midpoint of the vertical side of the rectangle. So if I left click there and then continue down here to this end point, you'll notice, can you see there, I'm getting an exact 45-degree angle each way. I left click again, enter to finish, and I've drawn those two lines at 45 degrees, utilizing that 45-degree increment in the polar tracking. I've also utilized a little bit of object snap tracking there as well. Now, ortho cannot work in conjunction with polar. Let me show you what I mean. If I come down to the status bar, there's polar tracking. It's on at the moment. You can see it's blue. There's ortho there. If I switch ortho on by left clicking on it, can you see polar tracking turns off? And the reason it does that is because now I'm locked into 90-degree increments orthogonally using the ortho setting. So let's go back to our line command on the draw panel. Line command here. If I now go to this midpoint here and click and move across, you'll notice as I move up and down, can you see I cannot move that line? It can only go horizontally, or if I come down, can you see vertically? So horizontally, vertically, up or down, or horizontally again. And that's what ortho does. It ties you into those 90-degree orthogonal increments. So I can come across here, go to the midpoint there, left click, enter to finish. If I draw another line now and go from, say, this midpoint here, you'll notice as I come down, I cannot go left and right. I can only go horizontally left and right and vertically up and down. So I come down to the midpoint, click again, and enter to finish the line command. So you can see the difference there between polar tracking and ortho, or orthogonal as it's sometimes known. Orthogonal is very rigid. You can only go up, down, left and right. That's it. No deviations at all. Polar tracking though, you can set specific angle increments and work to them in your Autocad drawings. You'll notice we are in the geometry drawing again, and I've left it in the same state as it was at the end of the last video. So you'll notice we've got the horizontal and vertical lines and the angled lines at the right-hand end of the rectangle. We're going to look at lines, arcs, and circles now in Autocad, and I'm briefly going to cover those so that you know, one, how to find them in the interface, and two, how the workflow and the process works to actually place them in your Autocad drawings. In order to make sure this works, make sure down here on the status bar that you've got your object snap tracking and object snaps on, and make sure that ortho is off and polar tracking is back on again, like so. Now, let's have a look at the line command first. That's the draw panel on the home tab on the ribbon, and there's the line command. Now, we have touched on this already. As soon as you click on the line command, it prompts you for that first point. So I'm going to come here to this midpoint snap, left click. It's also showing as an endpoint because it is also the endpoint of the horizontal line there. And as I come out, you'll notice now that the dynamic input is prompting me to specify the next point, or I can put a distance or an angle in as well. So I just come up here, find my next object snap, which is another endpoint, left click, enter to finish. That's how quick and easy it is to draw a line using object snaps. You can also draw a line using coordinates. Let me show you what I mean. Go back to the line command, or you can press the space bar or enter to repeat the last command. So I'm going to use an object snap here. There's my endpoint there, and I left click. So my line is starting from that point. Now, what I can do is I can physically type in a coordinate here. And most coordinates, after you've placed a base point or a start point, are relative. So if I tell Autocad now that I want to go to a coordinate that is 350 along the x-axis and then 350 along the y-axis, that will take me to the right and upwards, providing those values are positive. So the next point now, if I type in 350 like that and then press the comma key, can you see it goes to a coordinate readout? And then 350 again. So that's 350 in the x direction, 350 in the y direction. When I press enter, you'll see that it's drawn that line 350 along and 350 up. So along to the right and up. So there's that line segment there. It's now prompting me for the next line segment. Now, one of the benefits you've got with Autocad is I can right click and bring up the contextual shortcut menu. I can undo that last line segment and it takes me back to the beginning. I can then press escape to cancel the command and I'm back to where I was before. Now, the arc command in Autocad is a similar workflow. It's in the draw panel here. And if you click on the flyout, lots of different arcs are available to you. I'm going to utilize this one here, start, center, end. Now be aware, when you're drawing arcs in Autocad, by default, they follow the counterclockwise rule. So the positive direction for an arc is always counterclockwise. So, start point of my arc, I'm going to use the endpoint snap here, left click. Now prompts me for the center point, which I'm going to use the endpoint there, left click. And you'll see my arc come out, and there's the endpoint of my arc there, left click. So I've placed start, center, end of my arc counterclockwise, coming around on the bottom of the drawing there. Let's do that one more time. Now I can repeat the arc command, but this time, yeah, you can repeat it by pressing spacebar or enter. It's sometimes a little bit safer to go here though, and make sure you select which particular arc command you want, because there's plenty of them. I'm going to do start, center, end again. I'm going to start here, left click on the endpoint snap, center there, left click, and then as I come up to the endpoint snap here, left click again, there's my second arc, again going following the counterclockwise rule. So arcs are very simple as well, on a par with lines, but just make sure you're utilizing the right arc for the circumstances. Now, circle command as well, lots of different circle commands available in Autocad. If I click on the flyout here, you can see we've got center radius, center diameter, and so on. Now, most circles prompt for a center. However, you do have the 2-point and the 3-point, tangent, tangent, radius, and tangent, tangent, tangent. We're just going to use center radius, and I'm going to utilize this point here as the center point of my circle. As soon as I click, you'll see there the little blue box. I can specify a radius, or I could click on an object snap or a known point to specify a radius to a known point or object snap instead. I'm going to type in 250 as my radius in the input box and press enter. And there's my circle. Quick and easy. Center radius. Center diameter would perform a similar workflow process, but you're specifying the diameter of the circle. So there you have it, lines, arcs, and circles in Autocad. Very quick and very easy, and obviously you can explore that a lot more as you work through the videos in this Learning Autocad course. We're starting a new video now about drawing simple geometry in Autocad, and we're going to have a look at polylines, polygons, and splines. So we have a new drawing for you. It's called polylines.dwg. It's a blank drawing, and it's got all the appropriate layers set up in it for you, and you can download it from the library to follow along with the video. Once you've opened up the drawing, just make sure you go to your Layers panel in the Home tab on the ribbon. Click on the drop down here and make sure that you select polylines as your current drafting layer, because we're going to draw polylines first. Now, just before we start drawing anything, down to the status bar, make sure that your polar tracking is on, make sure that your object snap tracking is on, make sure that your object snaps are on as well. Now, we're going to have a look at creating a polyline. Now, these are remarkably similar to your regular lines, but they have some functionality that makes your life a lot easier. And it is more preferable to develop line geometry using polylines than it is the regular line command. So, Draw panel on the Home tab on the ribbon, there's the polyline command. Click on it and come into the drawing area. The dynamic input is asking you for a start point. Type in 300, 300. We'll start at a coordinate and press enter. And it starts us down here, bottom left. Using our polar tracking now, we're going to drag upwards like so. And as you come up the polar tracking line, in the input box there, type 500 as the distance and press enter. There's the first side of our polyline. We're then going to use the polar tracking again, drag across to the right, keep it on the polar tracking line. You'll see those little green dashes going along. And the distance will be 1200 this time. And press enter again. So you'll see there's the second segment of our polyline. Now here's where the benefits of the polyline kick in. I can now right click and select arc on the shortcut menu. I can now add an arc. I'm going to drag vertically down the polar tracking line and type in 500 again. And that'll give me the diameter of that arc. Enter, like so. And then what I'm going to do now is it wants to draw another arc. I right click and on the shortcut menu select line to go back to line segment, as you can see. And I don't even have to snap to the other end of that vertical line. I can just right click now and select close on the shortcut menu, and it closes my polyline. Now, the benefit I have is this isn't just 3 line segments and an arc. If I hover over it, you'll see it's actually a polyline on the polylines layer. So that's why polylines are useful. They are one object, easily manipulated, moved, copied, rotated, etc. Okay, let's jump to the Layers panel again, and we're going to click on the down arrow here and select polygons, like so. Now we're going to draw a polygon in the drawing this time, so just make sure you're on the polygon layer. And we're going to go up to the draw panel and click on this little flyout here, like so. And you can see that you've got the rectangle command, but you've also got the polygon command. I'm going to select polygon. Now the default number of sides for a polygon is 4. You can go obviously from 3 all the way up to 1024 sides with a polygon in AutoCAD. Not that you'd ever need it, and I don't know what one's called. A 12-sided polygon is a dodecahedron, if that helps. We're going to go for 6 sides, the hexagon, and enter. Now it's asking us for the center of the polygon. Now the good thing is we've got our object snaps on. Just come down to object snaps, click on the little arrow there, and just check that your center snap is on, and then click on your little arrow again. And that's one of the benefits of object snaps. You can go in and out of them at any time in the middle of any command. Now we want the center of the polygon. Now that's going to be the center of our arc here. Now if I hover there, I get an end point. If I hover there, I get a midpoint. If I hover there, I get an end point. As I come towards the center though, there's the center snap right there. So I left click. And I've now got 2 choices. I can have an inscribed polygon or a circumscribed polygon. Inscribed will draw it inside that arc or circle. Circumscribed will draw it about the arc or circle around the outside edge and make the sides tangential to that arc. I'm going to go for inscribed, and the reason I'm doing that is that then gives me, can you see, a vertex on the polygon, and I can take that out here and go to that midpoint snap there on the arc and left click. There's my inscribed polygon, a hexagon in this case, on the polygons layer. Quick and easy and simple. And you can see how this geometry, when you're using these commands in AutoCAD, makes your life so much easier. You don't have to think about angles or length of sides. It does all of that for you in the polygon command. Okay, last but not least, we're going to go to the Layers panel again and click on the drop down and select Splines. Now, splines are basically irregular curves following a group of given points. and they use a thing called NURBS technology, N-U-R-B-S. So whenever you're working with somebody with AutoCAD and they mention NURBS, it's a non-uniform rational B-spline. It's a logarithmic formula that allows the curve to be calculated between the points. I'm not going to explain it mathematically. That would take an entire day. But the whole idea is that the maths behind it allows you to create irregular curves using control points and fit points in your AutoCAD drawing. Now, the spline commands again are on the draw panel, but they're on the flyout. So click on the little flyout arrow there and just pin it open. And you'll see here that you've got two. You've got a spline fit and a spline CV, which stands for control vertices. Select spline CV and come into the drawing area. The first point you're going to snap to is the midpoint snap on the side here. Click once and then just go up and down like this, and you'll see the curve create itself along those control vertices that you're placing. So the triangles, each point on the triangle is a control vertex, and the curve is fitting those control vertices. And then when you get to this point here on the hexagon, just left click, press enter to finish, like so, and there's your spline. Now the benefit with splines is you can click on them, and there's all my control vertices, and I can click, and I can drag, and I can change the curve by moving the control vertex around the drawing, like so. What I can also do there is I can change this to a different type of spline. If I click on this triangle here, I can change it to a fit setting. If I do that, it gives me the grips on the actual spline itself. I can click on one of those and drag the curve up and down that way. I can click on the triangle again and convert it back to control vertices again if I want to. I then just hit escape to deselect. I can unpin the draw panel, and that's basically how you work with your polylines, your polygons, and your splines in AutoCAD. We're staying in the polylines.dwg file, and you can see I've left it in the same state as it was at the end of the last video. We're going to have a little look now at zooming and panning in AutoCAD. These are tools that allow you to navigate your drawings. So you can use your mouse initially to zoom and pan very quickly and very easily. You'll see the crosshair on the screen. If I position that on a location where I want to get closer to, I roll up on the wheel of the mouse and it zooms me in closer, as you can see. I roll back on the wheel of the mouse and it zooms me out again. Quick and easy. I can also double click on the wheel and that'll zoom to the extent of the visible drawn objects. I roll back a couple of notches on the wheel, and as you can see, it rolls back and zooms out slightly again. I can also hold down the wheel of the mouse and move the mouse, and I can pan in the drawing. So I can zoom in close to something, hold down the wheel, pan like so. I can then double click on the wheel to zoom extents again, and always use that double click on the wheel to zoom extents if ever you get lost in a complex drawing. It's very quick and easy to get out to the extents to see where you are, to see the wood for the trees. Now, if I right click on the mouse, you'll notice that you've also got pan and zoom here. So this is real-time pan and real-time zoom. So if I click on pan on the shortcut menu, you'll see I've got the hand there permanently. And when I hold down the left-hand mouse button, it kind of grips the drawing. And as I move the mouse, I can pan. When I release the left-hand mouse button, I'm still in real-time pan. So I have to right-click and now go to zoom for real-time zoom. Now I've got a permanent little magnifying glass. Hold down the left-hand mouse button and move up. I zoom in. Hold down the left-hand mouse button and move down, and I zoom out. I can right-click again. I can also do 3D orbits if I'm working in 3D, which we're not, but you could if you had a 3D model in front of you. I can do a zoom window off of that shortcut menu. So a zoom window, I can do a click and a drag and a release, and I zoom in to the extent of that window. I can right-click and do zoom original, which was the original view. I can also right-click there and do zoom extents as if I'm double-clicking the wheel. I can then right-click and exit the real-time zoom and real-time pan. If I roll back a couple of notches there, just so we can see what we're doing. Now, last but not least, you have a thing called the nav bar. It's over here on the right-hand side of the screen. You do have pan, you'll notice there, and you have zoom commands as well. So if I click on this little fly out here, there's all my zoom commands. So I can do a zoom window. Now the zoom window off of the nav bar is subtly different. If I click once, release the mouse button, drag and click again, it zooms to the extent of that window. But what I like on the nav bar zoom commands is I can do a zoom previous and go back to the previous view. It's a bit like an undo for zoom, which is really handy. There's also lots of other zoom commands that you can play around with there as well, such as zoom in. That will zoom you in 2 times. And then if I zoom out, that will zoom you out and make it half size. So it kind of cancels each one out, zoom in, zoom out. Lots of ways and means of zooming and panning in your AutoCAD drawings. Now, some of you may be saying, where's my navbar? It's not there. Simply type navbar as a variable, and you'll see there that you've got navbar display. If you click on navbar display, it should be 1 for on. If I set it to 0 and press enter, it'll switch it off. So again, I can now right click, repeat navbar display, set it to 1, and that'll switch the navbar back on the right hand side of the screen. But that's pretty much zooming and panning in AutoCAD. Those are the ones that you need to know. There are other ones that you can mess around with on the navbar and experiment with and see how they work. But what I've given you here are the main ones to allow you basically to navigate your AutoCAD drawings pretty effectively 99% of the time.